When my son brought his new wife home for the first time, I served them coffee in chipped ceramic mugs and let them believe that was the best I could do. It turned out to be the wisest decision I had made in my 67 years on this earth, because 14 days after their wedding, my daughter-in-law showed up at my door with a real estate attorney and a document that would have stripped me of everything. Everything. That is, if I had actually been the broke, forgetful old man she thought she married into. My name is Edward Calloway. I am 67 years old, a retired civil engineer from Asheville, North Carolina. I spent 38 years designing bridges and overpasses across the southeastern United States, and I retired quietly to the same modest split-level home I bought with my late wife, Miriam, back in 1991. From the outside, my life looks exactly like what people expect from a man my age on a fixed income. I drive a 12-year-old pickup truck. I buy my groceries on Wednesdays because that's when the store discounts the produce. My lawn is tidy. My porch light flickers sometimes, and my neighbors wave to me on their morning walks like I am a permanent fixture, steady and unremarkable. What very few people know, and what I had protected with deliberate, careful silence for nearly 8 years, is that Miriam left behind far more than memories when she passed. She had spent 20 years quietly accumulating commercial real estate across 3 states, purchasing small industrial properties through a private holding company registered in her maiden name. When she died, the entirety of that portfolio transferred to a family trust she had structured with a financial attorney she trusted completely. The net value at the time of her passing was just over $62 million. I kept it exactly as she left it, untouched, growing and invisible to everyone around me, including my own son. My son Daniel is 34. He works in marketing at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, and he is not a bad man by nature. He is weak, though. That particular truth took me a long time to accept. Weak in the specific way that some men become when they fall under the complete influence of someone far more calculating than themselves. His wife, Renata, is 31. She came from a family with money, or so she claimed, loud about it in the particular way that people are loud about things they desperately need you to believe. She wore her ambition the way some women wear perfume. You noticed it the moment she walked into a room. I had my concerns from the beginning. I kept them to myself. He loved her, or believed he did, and a father's role is not to dismantle his son's happiness based on a feeling in his chest. So I stood in a rented venue in Charlotte 14 months ago, watched them exchange vows, danced briefly at the reception, and drove myself home in my old truck without saying a word about the unease that had settled quietly behind my ribs. 14 days later, on a Tuesday morning in early October, I was in my garage recalibrating an old transit level I used for personal surveying projects when I heard a car door close in my driveway. I walked to the garage entrance and saw Renata stepping out of a white luxury SUV I didn't recognize. She was dressed like she was going to a closing, not visiting her father-in-law. Dark blazer, structured bag, hair pulled back with the severity of someone who had decided this was business. Behind her, climbing out of the passenger side, was a man carrying a leather portfolio. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and walked toward them, keeping my expression open and unhurried. "Renata," I said, "didn't expect you. Where's Daniel?" She didn't smile. She walked toward me with the particular kind of forward momentum that is designed to prevent you from thinking clearly. "He couldn't be here, Edward," she said. "He asked me to handle this. This is Philip Cross. He's an attorney." The man extended a hand. I shook it out of habit. He handed me a folded document before I had processed what was happening. I opened it on the porch. It was a petition for conservatorship, a legal filing asserting that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs due to cognitive decline, and requesting that my son, Daniel Calloway, be appointed my legal conservator, with full authority over my finances, property, and medical decisions. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Renata. "Who filed this?" I asked. "Daniel did," she said. "We both did. Edward, we've been worried about you for months. You've had some episodes. You left the stove on. You missed 2 doctor appointments. You told Daniel something last Thanksgiving that you had no memory of saying 2 days later. We are not doing this to hurt you. We are doing this to protect you." I stood there holding that document in the cool October air, and I let the silence sit between us for a moment. I did not raise my voice. I did not tremble. I have spent 4 decades solving structural failures, and the first rule of that work is that panic produces errors. I set the document down on the porch railing. I appreciate your concern, I said quietly. Let me read through this properly and I'll be in touch. Renata looked momentarily thrown by my calm. She recovered quickly. The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from Friday, she said. You'll receive the official notice by mail. I'd recommend you prepare yourself, Edward. The documentation we've gathered is thorough. She paused. It really would be easier on everyone if you cooperated. They left. I walked back inside. I sat down in Miriam's reading chair and stared at the wall for a long time. The stove. I knew exactly what she meant by that. 6 weeks earlier, Daniel had come to visit alone. He had made a point of cooking, insisted on it, in fact. Said he wanted to make his mother's chicken stew recipe from memory. He had sent me to the basement to look for a particular stock pot that I eventually concluded we no longer owned. When I came back up, there was a heavy smell in the kitchen and a burner going with nothing on it. Daniel had looked genuinely horrified. He'd made me sit down. He'd called it frightening. I had been confused. I remembered him working at the stove just before I went down, but he was so distressed that I let myself doubt my own sequence of events. I was not confused anymore. I went to my study and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a small leather notebook where I had kept a personal log for the past 4 years. Dates, observations, appointments, anything worth recording. A habit from engineering, where documentation is everything. I flipped to the entry from that afternoon. I had written it that same evening, when Daniel was still in the house. The entry read, Daniel here for dinner, cooked stew, sent me to basement for the Miriam pot doesn't exist anymore. Burner left on when I came back up. His error or deliberate? Note kept. 4 words. His error or deliberate. I had written them as a question. Now I had my answer. I closed the notebook. The picture assembling itself in front of me was not complicated. Renata had spent a year believing she had married into a family with modest assets, a split-level house, a pension, a truck. At some point, she had decided that waiting for nature to run its course was too slow, and that a conservatorship would give her and Daniel legal control over everything I owned while I was still alive. She could then liquidate my home, redirect my pension, and manage my affairs entirely under the cover of loving family care. What she did not know, what neither of them knew, was that the house and the pension were not the story. They were the misdirection. The actual story was $62 million sitting in a private trust registered to a holding company in Miriam's maiden name, managed by a financial firm in Atlanta whose senior partner, a woman named Gloria Tate, had been Miriam's closest friend for 30 years. I picked up my phone and called Gloria. She answered on the second ring. Edward, she said, I was wondering when you'd call. I saw the conservatorship filing this morning. One of our compliance monitors flagged it. Your son listed himself as next of kin on the petition, and it triggered an alert. How much do they know about the trust? I asked. Nothing, she said. The trust is structured completely outside your personal estate. Your name doesn't appear anywhere in the public filings. As far as any court is concerned, you are a retired civil engineer living on a pension and the equity in your home. Good, I said. I need you to hold all activity completely quiet. Don't move a dollar. Don't send any correspondence. Don't let anything surface. I need them to believe they are winning. There was a brief pause. Edward, I can have an attorney file a response to the petition by tomorrow morning. We can shut this down in a week. I know, I said. I'm not asking you to shut it down. Not yet. I need to understand the full shape of what they're doing before I respond. If I block them now, they'll simply regroup and try something I haven't anticipated. I need them moving forward, confident, and not watching their backs. Gloria had known Miriam for 3 decades. She understood patience as a form of power. What do you need from me? She asked. A forensic accountant, I said. Someone discreet. I want a complete picture of their finances within 48 hours. What they own, what they owe, and who they owe it to. I'll have someone to you by morning, she said. I thanked her and set down the phone. Then I did something I want every father listening to understand. I did not call Daniel. Not that night. Not out of anger, and not out of fear, but because I had learned something in 38 years of engineering that applies equally to family. Never reveal your load calculations to the structure you're testing. The financial report arrived by encrypted courier the following evening. I sat at my desk under the single lamp and read it the way I used to read bridge stress reports, looking for the fault line, the place where the load exceeded the design capacity. I found it quickly. Renata had not come from money. She had come from the appearance of money, which is a profoundly different thing. Her family's construction business in Greensboro had gone quietly insolvent 4 years before she met Daniel. The inheritance she had referenced at family gatherings didn't exist. What did exist was a pattern of spending that had continued regardless. Luxury apartment lease in Charlotte, 2 vehicle loans on imported cars, credit lines at their limits. And underneath all of it, the thing that explained the urgency of the conservatorship filing was a personal investment account Renata had opened in her own name 18 months ago. She had been trading aggressively in leveraged positions, commodity futures, high-risk options, and she had lost, quietly and consistently, for over a year. The total loss was just under $900,000. She had funded the account through a series of personal loans. The largest, for $400,000, had come from a private lending group based in Atlanta. The loan carried a 12% annual rate and a repayment clause that had accelerated following a missed payment 2 months ago. The lender had issued a formal demand letter. Renata had 14 weeks to produce $340,000 or face asset seizure and civil litigation. I set the report down. I looked at the ceiling for a moment. The conservatorship wasn't ambition. It was desperation wearing the mask of concern. She needed access to my estate specifically, to the equity in this house and whatever retirement accounts she believed I held, to bridge a gap she had created through her own reckless financial decisions. My son had either been told a partial version of this or had been kept entirely in the dark. Either way, he had signed his name to a legal filing designed to strip his father of independence in order to save his wife's finances. The following morning, I called Daniel. I kept my voice soft, a little uncertain, the way I imagined he expected. "Daniel," I said, "I got the paperwork from your attorney. I've been thinking about it. I don't really understand all of it, son. Could you and Renata come by Saturday? I'd like to talk through it together, as a family." His relief was audible. "Of course, Dad," he said. "Of course. That's all we wanted. We just want to help you." After I hung up, I went to my garage and found the small box of equipment I'd purchased online 3 years ago for a home security project I'd never fully implemented. 2 thumbnail-sized wireless audio sensors, the kind used in professional surveillance installations. I had bought them out of curiosity, tested them once, and stored them carefully. I charged both units that afternoon. Saturday morning, 2 hours before Daniel and Renata arrived, I placed the first sensor behind the decorative frame on the living room bookshelf, adhesive strip against the painted wood, microphone facing the center of the room. The second I tucked behind the molding in the hallway just outside my study, where anyone speaking privately near the back of the house would still be captured. Then I changed into an old cardigan and let myself look tired. They arrived at 11. Renata carried a ceramic dish covered in foil, a casserole, as if visiting an invalid, and Daniel had brought a bouquet of grocery store flowers that he set on the kitchen counter with the careful gesture of a man managing a guilty conscience. We sat in the living room. I let Daniel lead. He spoke gently, using the vocabulary of concern, cognitive health, assisted decision-making, transition planning. Renata sat beside him with her hands folded and her expression arranged into something approximating maternal worry. I asked questions that were slightly slower than my actual thinking. I repeated one question twice, deliberately. I watched Renata's eyes relax each time. After about 40 minutes, I told them I needed to use the restroom and asked them to help themselves to more coffee. I left the room. I stood in the hallway, perfectly still, and listened. The silence held for about 12 seconds. Then Renata's voice, very low. "He's fading faster than I expected." Daniel said something I couldn't catch completely. "It doesn't matter," she said, clearer now. "The hearing is in 2.5 weeks. Once the conservatorship is approved, we move immediately on the house. The equity alone covers everything with room left over." Philip says the court rarely denies these when the family presents documented incidents and a physician's note. "What physician?" Daniel asked. "I have someone," she said, "a practitioner in Gastonia who will review the case file and provide a supporting evaluation. He doesn't need to examine your father in person. The documentation we've already compiled is sufficient." I stood very still in the hallway. A paid medical opinion. A fraudulent physician's note filed as evidence in a legal proceeding. That was not reckless. That was calculated criminal fraud. Daniel's voice came again, quieter. "I caught only fragments. Feels wrong. And our only option. And what choice do we have?" We have the option that's right in front of us, Renata said, and her voice had dropped the warmth entirely. Your father has assets. We have a debt. The solution is obvious. Stop making it complicated. I walked back to the living room, cardigan slightly rumpled, and asked Renata if she'd mind getting me a glass of water since I'd forgotten to pour one for myself. She smiled and went to the kitchen. While she was gone, I looked at my son. He looked back at me. For one moment, the performance slipped his, not mine, and what I saw in his face was not greed. It was shame. Pure, undisguised shame. I could have said something in that moment. I chose not to. After they left, I sat with what I'd heard. The fabricated medical opinion was the detail that settled everything. This had moved far beyond a family dispute over finances. She was filing fraudulent documentation with a court of law. She was planning to use manufactured evidence to have a man declared incompetent, so she could liquidate his property to cover trading losses she had hidden from everyone, including likely her own husband. That was not family behavior. That was organized fraud against a vulnerable adult. I called Gloria. I need you to do something that will feel counterintuitive, I told her. I need you to purchase the debt. Silence. Renata has a loan from a private lending group in Atlanta, I said. $340,000 outstanding. I need your intermediaries to approach the lender and buy the note. Full cash purchase. Immediate close. I want the paper transferred to a holding company with no visible connection to me. Edward, Gloria said carefully, you'd be buying control of their debt. Exactly, I said. Right now that lender is an independent threat they're managing on their own. Once I own the note, I become their creditor. I control the timeline. I control the terms. And when I'm ready, I control the consequence. Another pause. Then, quietly, Miriam always said you were the most patient man she'd ever met. She wasn't wrong, I said. The purchase was completed within 36 hours. The Atlanta Lending Group, presented with a full cash offer at a slight premium, signed over the promissory note without hesitation. As of Thursday afternoon, Renata's debt belonged to a private holding company that I controlled through the trust. She had no way of knowing. To her, the lender had simply sold her account, a common enough occurrence in private lending, and the new holding company had sent a routine notice of assignment. Nothing alarming, nothing that would interrupt her plan. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for a Friday. On the Thursday before it, I called Philip Cross, their attorney, and told him I'd decided not to contest the filing and would appear voluntarily. His tone warmed immediately. He told me that was a very wise decision and that the process would be straightforward. I thanked him for his time. That evening, Gloria arrived at my home with 2 colleagues from her firm's legal division. We sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours, reviewing every document I had assembled. The audio recordings from the living room, the financial forensic report, the personal log I had maintained for 4 years, my travel and appointment records disproving any claimed pattern of cognitive decline, and the digital records proving the physician Renata had retained had no documented examination of me on file anywhere. We also prepared one additional document, a complete disclosure of the Calloway Family Trust, including its current valuation, its legal history, and my full competency as its sole beneficiary and managing trustee. $62 million. Clearly evidenced, clearly mine, clearly managed, with precision, across 8 years of uninterrupted decision-making. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in a suit I had not worn since Miriam's funeral. Dark gray, well cut, the kind of garment that communicates without speaking. I drove myself to the courthouse in my old truck, parked it in the public lot, and walked in carrying a leather folder I had carried into professional presentations for decades. Daniel and Renata were already in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was in a tailored jacket. He was in a tie. They both looked up when I appeared, and I watched the same expression cross both their faces. A brief recalibration, the slight unease of someone who expected a different version of a person. I nodded to them politely and walked past. The hearing was called to order. Philip Cross presented the petition efficiently. The documented incidents, the Thanksgiving conversation, the stove, the missed appointments. He referenced the physician's supporting evaluation. He spoke about the family's deep concern. He painted a portrait of a loving family making a painful but necessary decision to protect a vulnerable father. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with the composed attention of someone who had heard many variations of this story, asked if I had representation. I said I would be speaking on my own behalf, if she would allow it. She nodded. I stood up. I placed the leather folder on the table in front of me and opened it. I did not raise my voice. I did not perform distress. I spoke the way I had always spoken in professional settings, precisely, evidently, and with complete control of my material. I began with the physician. I submitted a signed affidavit from the State Medical Licensing Board, confirming that the practitioner named in the supporting evaluation had never held active licensure in North Carolina and had 2 prior citations for fraudulent documentation in other jurisdictions. I submitted a declaration from Philip Cross's own filing records showing that the evaluation was dated 2 weeks before the practitioner had any documented contact with any member of my family. The judge set down her pen. I continued. I submitted my personal log, 4 years of dated entries in my own hand, demonstrating consistent, coherent documentation of daily events. I submitted appointment records, travel receipts, financial correspondence, and 3 reference letters from professional contacts I had maintained since retirement, all speaking to my clarity and judgment. Then I played the audio. I had edited it to the relevant 43 seconds, Renata's voice, clear and unmistakable, describing the plan to move immediately on the house, referencing the paid physician, and stating, in her own words, "Your father has assets. We have a debt. The solution is obvious." The courtroom was very quiet. I then submitted the financial forensic report as evidence of Renata's actual financial circumstances, the trading losses, the hidden debt, the accelerated loan demand establishing motive clearly and completely. And finally, I placed the trust documentation on record. $62 million in a family trust, actively managed, amicably structured, maintained with full competency for 8 years. I looked at the judge. I am not a man in cognitive decline, I said. I am a man who was quiet, and who was mistaken for weak because of it. I sat down. Philip Cross had no response that functioned. He asked for a recess. It was granted. When the hearing resumed 20 minutes later, he submitted a motion to withdraw the petition on behalf of his clients. The judge denied the voluntary withdrawal, noting that the fraudulent medical documentation required referral to the state bar and potential criminal investigation. She dismissed the conservatorship petition with prejudice, meaning it could not be refiled, and ordered a full review of the supporting documentation for evidence of court fraud. Daniel had not spoken a word during any of it. He sat with his hands flat on the table and his eyes on the surface in front of him. When the session was dismissed and people began to move, he did not stand immediately. I walked past him toward the door. He said my name. I stopped. I turned around. He looked older than I remembered him looking, even from 2 weeks ago. Something had finished in his face. "I didn't know about the doctor," he said. "I want you to know that. I didn't know she'd done that." I looked at my son for a long moment. I thought about the shame I had seen in his face on Saturday in my living room, the only honest thing he had shown me in months. "I know," I said, "but you signed the petition, Daniel. You chose to sign it." I left him there. Outside the courthouse, the October air was sharp and clean. Gloria was waiting near the steps. She fell into step beside me as we walked toward the parking lot. "The holding company issued a formal default notice to Renata this morning," she said. "Since the petition withdrawal constitutes a material change in her disclosed assets, we're within rights to accelerate the full balance." "I know," I said. "What do you want to do with it?" I thought about Miriam. I thought about the bridges I had spent 38 years building, structures designed to carry weight across distances that would otherwise be impassable. I thought about what holds and what fails, and the difference between the two. "Give her 60 days to repay the principal at 0 interest, I said. "No penalties. No legal action. If she pays, the note is discharged. If she doesn't, proceed with standard collection." Gloria looked at me. "That's generous." "It's not generosity," I said. "It's engineering. I'm removing a dangerous element from a structure I still care about. Daniel is going to have to live with what he did. I'm not going to add to the collapse by destroying his wife financially on top of it. That's not justice. That's just more wreckage." End quote. End quote. I unlocked my truck. The door creaked when I opened it, the way it always does. I drove home on the same route I have driven for 20 years, past the same hardware store and the same diner where Miriam and I used to go on Sunday mornings. The mountains were starting to turn at the edges, the first suggestions of red and gold in the high canopy. In 38 years of building things meant to last, the most durable structure I ever designed was the quiet, patient life I had built with her. No one had managed to take it from me. They thought my silence was ignorance. They thought my patience was weakness. They thought a man who drove an old truck and bought groceries on discount Wednesday had nothing worth protecting. Fathers and grandfathers, I want you to hear this. The most dangerous thing you can be to someone who underestimates you is exactly what they expect right up until the moment you are not. If this story reached something in you, I'd be grateful if you'd hit like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one. Stay steady, friends. We're not finished yet. Silence is not the same as surrender. Edward never raised his voice, never rushed to defend himself, never gave anyone a reason to see the full weight of what he carried, and that patience, that quiet steadiness, was the very thing that protected everything he loved. If you've ever been underestimated, take heart. The people who mistake your calm for weakness have already made their most critical error. Keep building, keep documenting. Keep showing up in your good suit when the moment calls for it. A small note for you. This story was crafted and fictionalized by AI, shared here for your entertainment, and in the hope that the lesson tucked inside it about patience, dignity, and quiet strength stays with you long after the last word.